what's going to be covered in, so that that search button becomes available on the screen, and only then will it click it. But let's say 30 seconds has passed and you haven't yet, and it hasn't yet found that UI element, it will then run into an error. So it's an input field, that timeout, so you can change that default 30 seconds to anything else that you want. So the default is 30,000 milliseconds, not, so you wouldn't enter 30, you'd enter 30,000, which means 30 seconds. Okay, so here we have our first poll question. So on your screen, on your slide, you will be able to actually physically all this filter data table stuff. I did see we had a question. Somebody asked, in what scenario do we use keep? All right, so you'd use keep whenever you want to keep those, whatever your condition is here, you want to keep those rows which meet those these conditions. So it just depends what kind of what you want your data to look like. Sometimes you want to keep certain things, sometimes you want to remove certain things. Sometimes it's easier to use an expression to keep things, sometimes it's easier to use an expression to remove things. So it's usually whatever you can use less operations with to make it easier for yourself. Okay, I'm just going to delete all these. I'll keep this output data table for now. So currently we have this build data table. We have our username and age. Let's now create a new data table. I'm just going to say Control-C, Control-V. I'll keep the usernames, and instead of age here, I'm going to change this, and let's call it something like a city. I'll make this a string. Okay, and I'm just going to write some random cities like here. All right, Cape Town, Sarah, let's say USA, John, let's say India, Raj, let's say India, Sam, let's say UK, and I'll press OK. So now I'm just going to create a different name for this data table. So instead of DT user age, I'm going to say DT user country. So delete that. I'll right click, create variable, and I'll say DT underscore user city. Cool. Cool. So we have user age and that's a mistake. User age and user city. Then we're going to use a merge data table. I'm going to drag this merge data table just below our two build data table activities, and then you can see we have destination and we have source. So the destination is the one at the top and the source is the one at the bottom. So let's say we want our cities to be at the top, and then we want our ages to be at the bottom. We can come and enter DT user city, so that will be at the top, and DT user age, that will be at the bottom, and then we're adding the two together. Okay. City, so I'll enter DT user city, and let's run this. There you go. This is our result. We have our usernames. Okay, at the top we have our cities, and then over here we have our ages, just as expected. Notice with our ages we have a double comma and with nothing in between all these fields, and that's because those are all null values. That's because we don't have a city for all those fields. And over here at the top we have a comma, and then the final field is also null for the age. So where we have a city, we don't have an age. So that's why we have a single comma here and a double comma over there. Cool. Also something to note, when I used my output data table, I used the DT user city and not the DT user age. And the reason for that is because the destination data table is the DT user city. So the source means it's taking from the source, putting onto the city. So the destination is the output data table. All right. That is all for merging data tables. They often get confused about using arguments, what they are. Variables are more simple than arguments, but arguments are quite simple once you actually understand what they do and how they work. Before I move on to that, I see we have some questions, so I'm just going to cover that quickly. RP said, what if we want to show the age beside on the city? All right, if you want to show the age beside on the city. So you basically want to rearrange the order of your data table. Is that correct? Is that what you're trying to do? Somebody also asked, only add schema is in there in merging. There is others. All right, let me just show you quickly. Share my screen. Options, add, ignore, error, and add with key. So they all work differently. The add will basically add the two data tables together. Ignore will basically ignore, I believe it's either the one in the user age or the user city. Error will force an error when a merge is created. And add with key, that one actually doesn't work. Usually, I believe you should actually have a user key, like a primary key as an input when you select that, but it doesn't have that. So let me show you what the output looks like for all of them. Let's change it to ignore and run this. Okay, so you can see now, when we set ignore, we have, it didn't show the ages in the source. So using schema ignore will basically ignore all the field names in the source. So that's what that does. Sometimes there's a use case for that. I've personally never used it. Let's go to error. I believe error, this just runs into an error. Let's run that. There you go. So it runs into an error, target table, table name, missing definition for column age. So what that basically means, it'll run into an error if the schema is not exactly the same. So by schema, we mean the field name. So username, age is only available here, and username, city is only available here. If the schema was the same for both username, age, city, and then username, age, city, if it was the same, then it wouldn't run into an error. So that's what this does. Add with key, let's run that one. Okay, add with key looks like it does the same thing that the add one did. All right, so if you're using the add or the add with key, it does the same thing. Okay, stop. Cool.